Hello and welcome to this 15th session where we are going to continue exploring our color management system in Davinci Resolve. So now to continue, see that Davinci Resolve is open and I will open this color page video part 1, that is the project which we had imported from the archive in the previous session. All the source files are available, you can download and use it if required. So we are continuing from the previous session. Okay, we explored how we can use offset to offset a particular color, and when I turn the offset wheel, you could actually see how the entire graph moves to the top or to the bottom, and to reset it we click the reset button here. So we have understood that offset actually shifts the entire palette above or below. Now one thing I want to explain here is, when we are doing color grading, when we are adjusting the color, when we are adjusting the brightness, contrast, the television or the monitor in which you are working is very important. It should be perfectly calibrated. But a perfectly calibrated display like Apple display costs lakhs of rupees, and if you are doing it on a laptop or in any other machine, now what happens? If your display is not correctly calibrated, it will be very difficult for you to manage this color system, and this is where scopes comes into the picture, and that is the reason why we have to make all the color management using scopes. What is scope? So as you can see here, this is the waveform of all the signals present in my video. Irrespective of the monitor, this waveform will be the same. So whenever you make the changes, see that you make a use of the scopes. You have various types of scopes which we explored in the last class. You have parade, you have waveform, you have vectoroscope, you have histogram. So right now we are working with waveform, and here we have seen that the colorize is disabled and we are using only the Y channel. Y represents only the luminance channel. So this we had done it in our last class. Click outside to close that panel. Now here when I use the offset, you could see the entire graph shifting top and bottom, and you can see how the image is changing. Okay, so I will reset this. Now apart from this, in this session we are going to explore what is lift, what is gamma, and what is gain. Now if offset represents the entire graph, lift represents only the dark areas in your graph. For example, in this image, the dark areas like the shadow area over here, the shadow area over here, all this is controlled using lift. And now in lift, if I drag this center point and move it towards blue, you can see that the shadow area is more affected and the highlight area is less affected. So if I move it to left, it is going to change to yellowish. Okay, I will leave this here and double click on it to bring it to the center. Now apart from this, if you come to the wheel that is present at the bottom, if I move it up, you can now see only bottom portion of the graph is moving up. You can see the width of the graph is changing as I am changing the lift value, and if I decrease the lift value, it is coming down, and if I increase the lift value, it is moving up. Now remember, when we are doing this color grading, as already mentioned in the previous class, see that this bottom layer is just between this 0 and 128. It shouldn't touch 0, or it should not be too top above 128 like this, then you lose the clarity. So, that is why I will now move this slightly to the left, and as I am moving left, you can see it is coming down. I will move it slightly to the bottom, approximately I will move it to around minus 0.3. Now, you can see all these areas are darkened. Now, apart from lift, gain is opposite to lift. That is, gain is going to control the peak level of this graph, that is the highlight or the white areas or the bright areas of your image. So, in gain, if I make any changes, you can now see only the bright areas are changing. If I move it towards yellow, it changes to yellow. If I move it towards blue, it changes to blue. I will again double click to reset it, and here if I turn the bottom wheel, you can see the gain or the white areas are going to move up, and we are going to move it up, and as I move up, you can see if you make the darker area more darker and white area more white, you can see the picture contrastness is increasing, and as I change the gain, you can see the width of the graph is increasing. Okay. And when you are making this movement, again here, one of the brightest area in this entire image is this finger over here. This finger represents the brightest area, and this finger area in the graph is represented by these faded lines that you see over here represents the finger area, and you see that finger area should not go very top like this. Then again, this is wrong color correction. See that it's around 75, around 768 points. So, I will set this to a value of approximately 1.39. Okay. So, we have made these two changes. Then the next change that, and if you want to just compare it, what was the previous image and the image now, I can just click on this number. See, now this is disabled, and you can see this was the original image, and after our adjustment of lift and gain, if I again click here, it becomes enabled. Now, the keyboard shortcut to enable a particular node on and off is Ctrl plus D. If I press Ctrl plus D, it gets, see, it gets disabled, Ctrl plus D, it gets enabled. So, pressing Ctrl D, we can compare the two values like this. So, I will press Ctrl D and see that this is active. And now, one final control that I want to do is, I want to just slightly increase the midtones. Midtones are the area which is present between the brightest area and the darkest area, and midtone is represented here by all the graph values which exist between the peak value and the least value. So, whatever variation you are seeing here, these are called as the midtones, and to adjust these midtones, we use the middle wheel called gamma. So, understand, lift is to change the dark areas, gain is to change the bright areas, and gamma is to change the midtone. So, now if I turn this and make a change, you can see only the mid areas are changing. So, I will slightly move it and increase it to around 0.3. Okay. So, this appears to be somewhat fine now. Now, apart from these four wheels, remember, I will just repeat once again: offset, moves the entire graph. Lift changes only the bottom dark areas of the image. It either increases or decreases. Gain changes the highlight areas and gamma changes the midtones. So, lift represents shadows or dark areas, gain represents highlight areas and gamma represents the midtones area. Okay. So, with this clear, now the next thing I want you to understand is you have, apart from these four wheels, you have other values, fixed values here, that is temp, which represents temperature, tint, contrast, pivot, mid or detail, details of midtones. This represents details of midtones, color boost, shadows, highlight, saturation, hue and luminance mix. So, you have all these panels present over here. Now, if you come to temperature, this represents the color temperature of your image. One thing you have to remember here is, I will explain this in detail. When you are seeing any image or any graphic, the color of your image mainly depends on your source light. To give you an example, on a white sheet, if you give white light, it gives back white light. But if you give a red light, although the sheet or the wall is white, the light you get back is red. So, the color of the wall or the paper is white, but its actual color depends on the source light that you are going to use. And the source light, the natural source light, we get it from the sun, but artificially how do we generate the source light? We generate source light by heating something. Say for example, if you burn a candle, when you light it with a fire, the thing is you start getting light from it, and as you heat a subject, as its temperature increases, the color that comes from that source is going to change. Say for example, we call as the low temperature colors, low color temperatures, which is like 1600 values. To give you a very good example, now you take an iron piece and you start heating it. The very first color that you see from the iron as it heats is red. So, when you reach a temperature of about 1600 Kelvin, it starts emitting red light. You keep burning it, and when it reaches around 3200 degree Kelvin, you get yellow light. And then if you further keep on increasing it, and if you bring its temperature to around 5000 to 6000 degree Kelvin, you are going to see almost a pure white light source which has all the spectrum of colors. And if you heat it beyond 6000 degrees Celsius degree Kelvin, that is, if you heat it beyond 6000 degree Kelvin, then you are going to see what is called as the blue light. So, this is what we call as the color temperature. Now, here the thing is, when you are shooting, if you use a fluorescent lamp or a halogen lamp, when you use this tungsten filament lamp or halogen lamp, most of that light will be in yellow color. Whereas, in case of a cloudy weather, when the weather is totally cloudy, the source light will be bluish, and you want the white area of your image to remain white both in this cloudy area and also in the halogen lamp light. So, then what we do? We do an adjustment in the camera called as white balancing. What is this white balancing? Is we focus our camera to a white area and we see that the source light, if it is yellow, we are going to reduce yellow and increase blue so that it appears white, and if the source light is bluish like cloudy weather, then we decrease blue and increase yellow so that it appears white. So this adjustment we do it in camera while shooting. Now what happens is, when we are doing the shooting, if we have not done this adjustment correctly, if there is some error in this color balance or white balance, then we can compensate and recorrect it in Davinci Resolve using this temperature. So in this temperature, see, if I move it to the left, it turns, if I move it to the left, it is appearing bluish, see, and if I move it to the other side of the spectrum, see, it turns yellowish, see, you can see it is turning yellowish. Now it appears like it is shot in a fluorescent lamp, and if I make it and move it towards minus, this appears like you have shot in a cloudy weather. So to correct your source light temperature, we use this temp settings. So now let us understand exactly how we can do this color grading. So for now, what I am going to do is, I am going to come into this temperature window. See, when I make the change, either I can drag it on this number to make the change, or I can drag on temp and make the change. So I will, if I double click here, see, it gets reset to 0. So I have reset it to 0, and when I am doing this adjustment, I need more color in my image. So for this, what I will do is, in the bottom, the fourth value here represents saturation. Right now it is set to 50. I am going to drag it, or I will double click here and type 75. So now I have added more color to this, and after I have added the color, I can now, I will just bring my mouse over this area and I will right click it, and I am going to show, enable show picker RGB value. I will enable this option. So when I enable this option and when I move the mouse, now you can see wherever I am moving the mouse, you can see the red, green and blue values shown over there. So here, see, this is blue. So you are seeing more of the blue. Blue is higher, red and green is less. So if I come over here, this is yellowish. So red and green is high and blue is less. So like this, at every point I can see the red, green and blue values. And now I will choose an area in the image which is white or gray. I will select one of the whitish area, and I can consider this hippopotamus skin to be perfect gray. So that's why when I bring on this and when I am moving the mouse, you can clearly see that at these points green and blue values are less, red value is high. See, slightly red is high. This means that my image is slightly reddish. So if you have a white area in the screen, that will be very good to analyze it, but I am analyzing it using the gray area over here. And when I move on the gray area, you can see as the value changes, red is always more than green and blue. So now I get an idea that in my image I have more red. Now I have to reduce the red, and this area is the highlight area. So what I will now do is, highlight area is represented by gain. This already I have told you. So since it is represented by gain, now I am going to drag this gain. So red is here. I will drag it away from this gain. But when I try to do this adjustment using this color wheel, I will double click and reset it. It is very difficult to precisely control it. So, in this case, instead of the color wheel, I am going to use the color bars. So, if I click on the color bars, now the same values are now represented as bars. And now what I will do is, you have one here for the red gain. I will select the red gain and slightly reduce it by around 3 points. I have made it 0.97, and now if I come and see here, the color values are almost matching. So, now if required, I will pull it down a little more to around 0.94. So, pulling it down to 0.94, now if I come and see, now you can see that the values in the gray area is almost matching, 145, 145, 143. So, these three values, if it is matching correctly in a gray area or white area, it means that your color has been perfectly matched. So, now in this image what we did first, we adjusted lift and gain to adjust this scope, and after this adjustment we then increased the saturation and we actually did the color balance. So, instead of randomly adjusting using the temperature, we used this color picker, and using this gain we were able to achieve uniform lighting. So, we choose the hippopotamus skin, which is gray, as the reference point, and in this reference point we saw that we tried to keep RGB value same by decreasing the red gain a little, because red was more. So, using this we have done the correction. So, this color grading that we have applied till now is called as corrective grading. Corrective grading means we are eliminating the mistakes that has happened during the shooting, either due to wrong source light or due to some lighting condition, due to under and over exposure. We are adjusted and we have corrected it using the scope. We adjusted in such a way so that the lowest level is not touching 0 and highest level is not crossing 768, and then we next adjusted the color choosing the gray area and see that the RGB values matched. After this, the next type of grading that we apply is called as creative grading. Creative grading means here we are not going to correct the image, but we are going to add some, that is kind of effect. We want to artificially make the image more bluish to appear like it has been shot in moonlight, or more reddish or yellowish to make it appear like it has been shot in a candlelight. So, this is what we call as creative grading. And for creative grading, we are not going to use this same node. Let us do these changes in a different node. Now, for this what I am now going to do is, I am going to add a new node. This is node number 1, and if you come down here you see 4 lines, and if I just roll the mouse here, you can see that what all changes I have applied. I have applied primary balance, saturation, hue and luminance mix. Okay, so these are the effects that I have applied. Now, I am going to create a new node. Now, what happens is, when you are doing the changes, don't do all the changes in one node. It will be very difficult to work it back. So, that is why every change you maintain a different node. Say for example, in my first node, I doesn't want to have the changes of my gain, hue, saturation and gain control, which I did it here. I increased saturation to 75 and made changes to gain. So this I doesn't want it to do it in my first node. So what I will do is I will reset my gain, and also I will double click on saturation and I will reset it. So this is my adjustment of only the graph. So I have readjusted only the graph. One thing is my gain has changed because I reset the gain, all the values of gain has changed. So I have to re-increase my gain here, overall luminance gain. So I had decreased it, so I had actually set its value to around 1.39. okay. So this is the change that I have done in my first node. In my first node I have adjusted only the gain, lift and gamma, and also offset we didn't make any change. So these three corrections I made it in the first node, and I am going to right click it and I am going to add a node label, and I am going to call this change as exposure. So we have controlled basically the exposure here. Okay. Now I will right click here and I will go here add node, and I am going to choose add serial. You also have a keyboard shortcut for this. So instead of going to add node, add serial, if you just press Alt plus S, you can see a new node has been added. And in this node I am going to do the color grading, which I had done it in the last session. So what we actually did was we increased saturation to 75 and reduced the red gain to around 0.94. So I will make these two changes here, and then see, you can see here what are the changes I have done here. I have done saturation, hue and lumix. So these are the changes, and I am going to right click here and I am going to add the label here as color balance. So we have done the color balance in this node. So at any time I can click on this one number and disable this and see the other node effect. I can enable this and disable this and see the difference, how the color has changed. Okay. Now these two are called as the corrective grading, and I am now going to come to the creative grading. And for this creative grading, what I am now going to do is I am going to add one more node now. I will again press Alt plus S or go over here and choose add node, add serial. I have added the third node, and in this third node I am going to give it the node label. I will right click and give the node label as look, because this is a creative color grading. And when I give it the name as look, now what I want is, although this picture is good, I want to make it more contrast. And now I am not going to adjust the contrast using gain and lift. I will come to this contrast and I am going to drag it to right and slightly increase the contrast level to approximately around 1.240. I will make it 1.250. Okay. So this has increased the contrast level. So what has now happened is white area has become more whitish and black area has become more blackish. So you can control this either using decreasing lift and increasing gain, and the other control you have is this contrast level. So I have increased by around 25%. Now when this contrast is changing, this contrast black and white level is changing at a mid gray level, and I want this contrast level to change this mid level. Instead of changing it from half gray towards white and towards black, this is called as the pivot point. Pivot point means it is the point, exact half point between white and black. Okay, it is set to 0.435 here. So I am now going to, this pivot value is always linked with contrast. So when you make changes to contrast, you can control the contrast range using pivot. So what happens is pivot is the middle reference line for this contrast control is either going to come down or up. So if I change the pivot and move it to the left, you can see the image is turning brighter, but at the same time the image is turning whiter, but at the same time what is happening, the contrast level remains the same. But if I move it on the other side, it is turning darker. So I will somewhere leave it at around 5.8 so that it is slightly darker. So I will make it 5.8. So I will leave it at 0.581. So I have added this contrast and pivot level. I have controlled this and have made my image look more rich in detail by just increasing the contrast and adjusting the pivot. Now you can see the details around the eyes more clearly. So if I just disable it, you can see the difference by enabling and disabling this node. Okay, after this, for the next grading, I am now going to switch back to wheels, and in wheels now I want to add some creative color look to this scene. So what I will do is I will come to this offset here, and in offset I am slightly going to drag this point slightly towards cyan, so that the picture has some of that cyanish look. And when you are doing this, keep your left hand on your keyboard and press Ctrl D to see. This is the original, this is the original, and this is with the color grade. So I can see the difference as I am doing the grading. Okay, so that I doesn't make too much of random changes. So it's always better to press Ctrl D and compare and see what is original and what is so that's why I keep always my left hand on this Ctrl D, and in my right hand I am going to make the changes. So I slightly move it towards the cyan. So I have moved it slightly towards the cyan. Okay, I will press Ctrl D. So you can see this is the effect you are seeing. It is too much of cyanish now. I will slightly move it and reduce it a little. Okay. Now next thing is I am going to come over to the lift here, and I am going to drag the dark areas, okay, towards red, the opposite color, to balance so that it appears like a dual tone image. See, I will slightly move it towards red, and this now appears like a dual tone image. So apart from these two, the next control that I am going to go into is this mid-range detail. And here what does mid detail do is, in the mid range, say for example you are seeing these lines on this wood, you are seeing the details on this hippopotamus skin. These details are controlled using this mid detail. Actually in the effect it appears like it is sharpening the image, but actually what it does is it is going to increase the contrast level of only the mid range colors. So if I drag this and if I adjust it, so if I drag it too much to 100, you can see how the clarity appears, how this is appearing. So I can just click here, I can disable and enable, and you can see how much clear my picture became. Okay, but 100 is too dramatic. I will set this value to approximately 40. Okay, so with this exposure, color balance and look, we have successfully graded our very first clip. So with this, we are now going to conclude this session. So in this session, we did first an exposure correction by adjusting our scope graph. Then we did color correction to adjust the source light, which we call as white balance. By choosing either a white or gray area, we tested the RGB values, and if some value is more, we decreased it and we corrected it. And finally, we added some creative look by increasing the contrast, changing the pivot point of that contrast, and then we also made it like a dual tone image by offsetting it to cyan, and in lift we offsetted it to red in the opposite color, and finally we added some mid detail. So with this, our entire project or the first clip is now completely graded. Let us continue with the color grading of our second clip. Thank you.